Laura Bennett loved taking long walks in the evening. It was her way of unwinding after a stressful day at work. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood surrounded by woods, which made her daily strolls even more enjoyable. On this particular evening, she decided to bring along her dog, Max. Max was a cheerful golden retriever who always seemed to know exactly when it was time for their walk. As soon as Laura grabbed his leash, he started wagging his tail excitedly. The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm orange glow over everything. The air was thick with humidity, making it feel heavier than usual. Still, Laura didn't mind. She enjoyed the peacefulness of the outdoors, especially during these twilight hours. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and leaves rustled gently in the breeze. It all felt so calming, until the mosquitoes showed up. At first, there were only a few of them. They buzzed lazily around Laura's head, occasionally darting closer before flying away again. But as she ventured deeper into the wooded trail, their numbers grew. Soon they were everywhere, forming tiny clouds that hovered annoyingly close to her skin. No matter how many times she swatted at them, they kept coming back. Ugh, Laura muttered under her breath, slapping at her arm. One particularly bold mosquito had landed there and was already biting her. She managed to shoo it away, but not before it left behind a small red bump. "Great," she said sarcastically, glancing down at the mark. "Just what I needed." Max, oblivious to her irritation, trotted happily beside her. He sniffed at bushes and paused every now and then to examine interesting smells on the ground. Laura smiled despite herself. Watching him always lifted her mood, no matter how frustrating the mosquitoes could be. As they continued walking, Laura noticed something odd about the bite on her arm. It wasn't like any mosquito bite she'd ever experienced before. Instead of fading quickly, it began to swell almost immediately. Within minutes, the area turned bright red and felt warm to the touch. Laura frowned, rubbing it absent-mindedly. Maybe she was just being paranoid, she thought. After all, bug bites could sometimes act weird depending on where you were or what kind of insect had bitten you. By the time they reached the halfway point of the trail, Laura had almost forgotten about the bite altogether. The cool evening air helped soothe her skin, and the itching subsided. She stopped briefly to tie her shoelace, kneeling down on the dirt path while Max waited patiently beside her. When she stood up again, she caught sight of movement out of the corner of her eye, a dark shape flitting between the trees. "What was that?" she murmured, squinting into the shadows. For a moment, she thought she saw something moving unnaturally fast, too quick to be an animal. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, whatever it was vanished. Shaking her head, Laura chalked it up to fatigue playing tricks on her mind. She hadn't been sleeping well lately, and staying up late working on projects certainly wasn't helping. Deciding it was time to head home, Laura turned back toward the trail leading out of the woods. Max seemed eager to go too, bounding ahead of her with renewed energy. As they walked, Laura couldn't shake the strange feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made her glance over her shoulder nervously. Yet each time she found nothing but empty forest behind her. When they finally stepped out of the woods and onto the street leading to her house, Laura breathed a sigh of relief. The familiar sight of her neighborhood brought a sense of normalcy back to her evening. She unlocked the front door, let Max inside, and collapsed onto the couch. Exhaustion washed over her, and she realized just how tired she really was. Her husband, Daniel, came home shortly afterward. He worked late most nights, so it wasn't unusual for him to arrive after Laura. Seeing her sprawled out on the couch, he raised an eyebrow. "Rough night?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. "You have no idea," Laura replied, sitting up slightly. She told him about the mosquitoes, the mysterious bite, and the odd sensation of being watched in the woods. Daniel listened intently, nodding occasionally, but not saying much. When she finished, he gave her a reassuring smile. "It's probably nothing," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But if you're worried, we can keep an eye on it. Just try to get some rest tonight." Laura nodded, appreciating his attempt to reassure her. Still, as she lay in bed later that night, sleep eluded her. Her body felt strangely heavy, weighed down by an inexplicable fatigue. Even stranger was the tingling sensation spreading from the bite on her arm. At first it was barely noticeable, like pins and needles, but as the hours passed it grew stronger, pulsing rhythmically beneath her skin. She tossed and turned, unable to find comfort. Daniel slept soundly beside her, unaware of her growing unease. Finally, just before dawn, exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted off into a restless slumber. Little did she know, her ordeal was only beginning. By morning, the bite would look worse than ever, and the symptoms would escalate far beyond anything she could have imagined. What Laura also didn't realize was that she wasn't alone. Across town, others were experiencing similar symptoms, all linked to mosquito bites they had received in recent days. None of them knew it yet, but they were part of something much bigger, something that defied explanation. And deep within, the woods near Laura's home, hidden beneath layers of secrecy, scientists scrambled to contain a threat they themselves had unleashed, one that had now spread beyond their control. By morning, Laura's condition had worsened dramatically. When Daniel woke up, he found her still lying in bed, but she looked different, paler, weaker. Her breathing was shallow, and beads of sweat covered her forehead despite the cool air in the room. The bite on her arm had swollen even more, turning an angry shade of red with dark spots forming around its edges. It looked painful, almost infected. "Laura?" Daniel called softly, gently shaking her shoulder. She didn't respond. He tried again, louder this time. "Laura, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open briefly, but they were glassy and unfocused. She mumbled something unintelligible before slipping back into unconsciousness. Panic gripped Daniel as he realized how serious this might be. Without wasting another second, he dialed their family doctor, Dr. Harris, who listened carefully to Daniel's description of Laura's symptoms. "This sounds bad," Dr. Harris said after a pause. "Bring her to the emergency room right away." The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. Daniel helped Laura into the car, supporting her limp body as best he could. She was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently and shivering despite the heat outside. Every bump in the road seemed to jolt her further into discomfort, and Daniel clenched the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with worry. At the hospital, things moved quickly. Nurses rushed Laura onto a gurney and wheeled her away, leaving Daniel standing helplessly in the hallway. He watched as doctors surrounded her, attaching wires and tubes to monitor her vital signs. A nurse approached him, clipboard in hand, asking questions about Laura's medical history and what had happened leading up to her collapse. "She got bitten by a mosquito 2 nights ago," Daniel explained. "It started swelling, and then, last night, I don't know, she just wasn't herself anymore." The nurse nodded sympathetically and assured him that the doctors would do everything they could. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse than a bug bite was going on here. He paced nervously in the waiting area, replaying every detail of the past few days in his mind. Why hadn't he taken Laura's concerns seriously earlier? What if whatever was happening to her spread? Hours passed before a doctor finally emerged to speak with him. Dr. Emily Carter introduced herself as an infectious disease specialist. She looked tired but determined, her scrubs slightly rumpled from hours of work. She led Daniel to a private consultation room where she began explaining what they had discovered so far. "We've run several tests on your wife," Dr. Carter began, her voice steady but measured. "Her blood work shows elevated levels of inflammation, which explains the fever and fatigue. But there's something else, a foreign substance we can't identify. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Daniel frowned, leaning forward in his chair. "What do you mean? Is it some kind of infection?" Dr. Carter hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It's possible, but not one caused by any known bacteria or virus. This organism seems to have characteristics of both, a parasite and a virus. It's mutating rapidly inside her body, adapting faster than we can track." "Mutating?" The word sent chills down Daniel's spine. He thought back to the strange, tingling sensation Laura had described the night before, the way she had struggled to stay awake. Was this organism responsible for all of it? "There's more," Dr. Carter continued, her expression grim. "We've detected unusual activity in her nervous system. Whatever this thing is, It's interacting with her, cells in ways we don't fully understand. We're doing everything we can to stabilize her, but honestly, we're working blind here. We need more information, and fast." As she spoke, Daniel noticed the tension in her voice. This wasn't just a routine case. It was something extraordinary and terrifying. He wanted to ask more questions, demand answers. But deep down, he knew she was telling him everything she could. Science had limits, and right now those limits were being tested. Back in Laura's room, the scene was chaotic. Machines beeped constantly, tracking her heart rate, oxygen levels, and other vitals. Her skin had taken on an unnatural pallor, almost translucent in places. Dark veins spider-webbed outward from the bite on her arm, spreading like cracks in glass. Doctors hovered over her, adjusting medications and discussing treatment options in low voices. Despite the flurry of activity, Daniel felt utterly powerless. He sat by Laura's bedside, clutching her hand tightly, willing her to wake up. Occasionally, her eyelids would flicker or she'd let out a faint moan, but she never fully regained consciousness. Each moment stretched longer than the last, filled with uncertainty and fear. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She pored over lab results, consulting colleagues and experts in fields ranging from virology to astrobiology. The more data she gathered, the stranger the picture became. The organism in Laura's bloodstream defied classification. It contained genetic material that didn't match anything found on Earth. Some sequences hinted at extraterrestrial origins, though no one dared say it aloud just yet. In quieter moments, Daniel found himself reflecting on their life together. How had they ended up here? Just 2 days ago, they were planning a weekend getaway, laughing over dinner, talking about future dreams. Now, Laura lay in a hospital bed fighting for her life against something no one understood. It felt surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. As the day wore on, new developments added to the mystery. One of the nurses mentioned hearing rumors about similar cases elsewhere, patients presenting with unexplained fevers, hallucinations, and rapid physical deterioration. At first, Daniel dismissed it as coincidence, but when Dr. Carter confirmed that reports had indeed surfaced in rural areas nearby, his stomach sank. This wasn't isolated to Laura. Something much bigger was happening. That evening, as Daniel sat alone with his thoughts, a chilling realization dawned on him. The woods where Laura had been bitten weren't ordinary woods. They bordered a restricted area marked with warning signs about government testing facilities. He remembered seeing news articles months ago about meteorite fragments being studied there. Could that somehow be connected to what was happening to Laura? Before he could dwell on it too long, a commotion erupted in the hallway. A team of specialists rushed into Laura's room, shouting orders and adjusting equipment. Her vitals had spiked dangerously high, and her body temperature was rising uncontrollably. For a brief, horrifying moment, Daniel feared he might lose her right then and there. But somehow, against all odds, the crisis passed. Laura's condition stabilized, though only temporarily. As the doctor stepped back, exhausted but relieved, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could figure this out in time to save her. But deep down, he knew the battle was far from over. Whatever this organism was, it wasn't done with Laura or anyone else it had touched. Just yet. Dr. Emily Carter spent the next several hours locked in her lab, poring over every piece of evidence she could gather about Laura's condition. She knew time was running out, not just for Laura, but potentially for others who might have been exposed to the same organism. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't behaving like any known pathogen. It was smart, adaptable, and spreading faster than anyone anticipated. The first clue came from analyzing the genetic material extracted from Laura's blood. At first glance, it looked like nothing special, a jumble of strange codes that didn't match anything in existing databases. But as Dr. Carter zoomed in closer, patterns began to emerge. These weren't random mutations. They were deliberate changes, almost as if the organism was learning and evolving on purpose. And then there were the anomalies, sequences that shouldn't exist anywhere on Earth. Her heart raced as she cross-referenced the data with classified reports she'd accessed through government channels. Buried deep within those files was information About a meteorite that had crashed years earlier near the woods where Laura had been bitten. Scientists had recovered fragments of the rock, studying them in secret labs hidden beneath layers of security. Early findings suggested the meteorite contained microscopic life forms, unlike anything ever seen before. Some scientists believed these organisms held the key to groundbreaking discoveries in medicine and technology. Others warned they could pose unimaginable risks. Dr. Carter realized with growing dread that one or more of these alien organisms had somehow escaped containment. Whether by accident or design, they had infiltrated local ecosystems, hitching rides on mosquitoes and other insects. Now they were infecting humans, using their bodies as incubators to multiply and adapt. Laura wasn't just sick. She was ground zero for a biological threat no one fully understood. Meanwhile, Daniel sat outside Laura's hospital room, trying to process everything Dr. Carter had told him so far. His mind kept circling back to the woods, the same place where Laura had been bitten. He remembered seeing warning signs posted along the edges of the trail, forbidding entry beyond certain points, government testing facilities, restricted areas, meteorites. It all added up to something sinister, something far bigger than he'd initially imagined. Determined to find answers, Daniel decided to investigate further. He called his friend Jake, a journalist who specialized in uncovering secrets buried by powerful institutions. Jake listened intently as Daniel explained what little he knew about Laura's illness and the connection to the nearby woods. Though skeptical at first, Jake agreed to help once Daniel mentioned the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement. Extraterrestrial? Jake repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. Are you serious? I'm not making this up, Daniel insisted. Something weird is going on here, Jake. I need your help to figure it out. Jake promised to look into it, starting with public records and leaked documents related to the meteorite study. While he dug through archives, Daniel returned to the hospital, hoping to learn more from Dr. Carter. When he arrived, she was hunched over her laptop, typing furiously while muttering to herself. Seeing him approach, she sighed and gestured for him to sit down. We've made some progress, she said, rubbing her temples. But it's not good news. This organism isn't just reproducing inside Laura, it's rewriting her DNA. Every cell in her body is being altered at a fundamental level. If we don't stop it soon, she won't survive. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Is there anything we can do? Any treatment options? Dr. Carter hesitated, weighing her words carefully. There's one possibility. An experimental procedure involving gene editing technology. We'd essentially try to target the alien DNA and neutralize it before it takes over completely. But it's risky. One wrong move and we could accelerate the infection instead of stopping it. Hearing this, Daniel felt torn between hope and despair. Was it worth risking Laura's life on an untested procedure? Or should they wait and see if her body could fight off the infection on its own? Before he could decide, Jake called with startling news. I found something, Jake said breathlessly. Apparently there's been a string of similar cases across remote parts of the country, all linked to mosquito bites near wooded areas. People are getting sick, disappearing, or dying outright. No one knows exactly why, but it traces back to that meteorite crash site. Someone messed up big time. Daniel relayed this information to Dr. Carter, who nodded grimly. It makes sense, she admitted. This thing has been spreading silently for months, maybe even years. We're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Armed with this knowledge, Daniel and Dr. Carter agreed they couldn't afford to wait any longer. They needed to act quickly to save Laura and prevent the infection from spiraling out of control. Together, they devised a plan. Use the experimental gene editing procedure immediately, despite the risks. Time was against them, and doing nothing was no longer an option. As preparations began, Daniel stayed by Laura's side, holding her hand tightly. Her body was still fighting, though barely. Machines beeped steadily around her, tracking her weakening vitals. Dark veins continued to spread outward from the bite, creeping up her arm like vines overtaking a tree trunk. Occasionally her lips would part, forming silent words or gasps of pain. Watching her suffer was unbearable, but Daniel refused to leave her alone. In the lab, Dr. Carter worked tirelessly alongside her team to refine the treatment protocol. Nanobots designed to seek out and destroy foreign DNA were programmed with precision, calibrated to avoid damaging Laura's healthy cells. Every step of the process required meticulous attention to detail. One mistake could mean disaster. Finally, after hours of preparation, the moment arrived. Laura was wheeled into the operating room, surrounded by doctors and nurses armed with cutting-edge tools. Daniel watched anxiously from behind a glass partition, praying silently that the procedure would work. As the nanobots were injected into, her bloodstream monitors displayed real-time data showing how the alien DNA responded. For a while it seemed like nothing was happening. Then, slowly but surely, the monitors showed signs of improvement. The alien DNA began retreating, its hold on Laura's body weakening. The swelling around the bite started to subside, and her vitals stabilized slightly. For the first time in days, there was a glimmer of hope. But just as everyone began to relax, something unexpected happened. Laura's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. Her breathing quickened, and her fingers twitched involuntarily. Alarms blared as her heart rate spiked dangerously high. Panic swept through the room as doctors scrambled to stabilize her once again. Through the chaos, Daniel stared in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening. Had the procedure failed, or had something gone terribly wrong? As the medical team worked frantically to bring Laura back under control, Dr. Carter exchanged worried glances with her colleagues. Whatever had awakened inside Laura wasn't entirely gone. It was merely dormant, waiting for its next move. The operating room was filled with tension as Laura's body reacted unpredictably to the experimental treatment. Her eyes glowed faintly with an eerie blue light, sending waves of alarm through the medical team. Machines beeped wildly, their readings fluctuating rapidly as her heart rate spiked and her breathing became erratic. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the center of the chaos, shouting orders while trying to keep her own emotions in check. "Adjust the sedatives," she commanded, watching as one of the nurses hurried to tweak the IV drip connected to Laura's arm. "We need to calm her system down before it shuts down completely." Daniel watched helplessly from behind the glass partition, his hands pressed against the cool surface. His mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. What was happening to Laura? Was the procedure failing? Or had something gone horribly wrong during the process? He wanted to rush into the room to hold her hand and tell her everything would be okay, but he knew he couldn't interfere. All he could do was wait and hope. Back inside the operating room, Dr. Carter studied the monitors closely. Despite the alarming symptoms, there were signs that the nanobots were working. The alien DNA in Laura's bloodstream was breaking apart, its invasive presence weakening with each passing second. But the organism wasn't giving up without a fight. It seemed to be triggering some kind of defensive response within her body, causing her systems to go haywire. "We're dealing with something far more complex than we anticipated," Dr. Carter muttered to herself, adjusting the settings on the equipment controlling the nanobots. She turned to her assistant, a young doctor named Sarah. "Increase the dosage incrementally. We can't overwhelm her system, but we also can't let this thing regain control." Sarah nodded and made the necessary adjustments, her hands steady despite the pressure. Everyone in the room understood the stakes. If they failed, Laura might not survive. And if the organism managed to spread further, the consequences could be catastrophic. As the minutes dragged on, the situation began to stabilize. Laura's heart rate slowed, and her breathing returned to a more normal rhythm. The glowing blue light in her eyes faded gradually until it disappeared entirely. Though still unconscious, she looked peaceful again, her face relaxed and free of pain. The monitors showed significant improvement, with the alien DNA now reduced to trace amounts in her bloodstream. Dr. Carter exhaled deeply, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. "It worked," she said softly, turning to address the team. "For now, at least. Let's keep monitoring her closely. This isn't over yet." Outside the operating room, Daniel sank into a chair, overwhelmed with emotion. He had watched every second of the procedure, his heart pounding with fear and hope. Now that it was over, exhaustion set in, leaving him drained, but grateful. A nurse approached him, offering a reassuring smile. "She's stable for now," the nurse said gently. "You should get some rest. She'll need you when she wakes up." But Daniel shook his head. "I'm not leaving her side," he replied firmly. "Not until I know she's truly safe." Later that evening, after most of the medical staff had left, Daniel sat beside Laura's bed once again. Her condition had improved enough for her to be moved back to a private recovery room. Machines still monitored her vitals, but the frantic urgency of earlier had subsided. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the equipment and the occasional rustle of fabric as Daniel shifted in his seat. He held her hand tightly, studying her face for any sign of awareness. Her skin no longer carried the sickly pallor it had before, and the swelling around the bite on her arm had almost completely disappeared. Still, there was something different about her, something subtle but undeniable. It was as if a part of her had changed in ways science couldn't yet explain. Dr. Carter entered the room quietly, carrying a folder filled with notes and test results. She pulled up a chair next to Daniel and opened the file, explaining what they had learned so far. "The organism is mostly neutralized," she said, pointing to graphs showing the decline of alien DNA in Laura's system. "But we found remnants of it embedded deep within her neural pathways. They're dormant for now, but, well, we don't know how long that will last." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Will it come back?" Dr. Carter hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It's possible. The organism seems to have left behind some kind of imprint, a sort of memory of itself, in her brain. We don't fully understand what it's doing there or what it might trigger in the future. For now, though, she appears to be out of immediate danger." Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing the information. He didn't like the idea of uncertainty hanging over Laura's head, but he was grateful she was alive. "Is there anything else we can do?" he asked. "For now, observation is key," Dr. Carter replied. "We'll continue running tests to monitor her progress. If anything changes, we'll act quickly. Beyond that, all we can do is wait and see how her body responds." Over the next few days, Laura remained unconscious but stable. Her body continued to heal, though the strange energy that had briefly overtaken her lingered faintly in the background. Doctors noticed small anomalies in her brain activity, patterns that suggested heightened awareness or even communication with something beyond human understanding. None of them dared speculate too much, fearing they might jump to conclusions based on incomplete data. During this time, Daniel spent countless hours researching the meteorite crash site and the government project linked to it. With Jake's help, he uncovered documents detailing secret experiments conducted on the alien organisms recovered from the meteorite fragments. Some scientists had warned early on about the risks of exposing these life forms to Earth's environment, but their concerns had been ignored in favor of potential breakthroughs. One document caught Daniel's attention, a report describing how mosquitoes in the area surrounding the crash site had been inadvertently exposed to the organisms. The insects became carriers, spreading the infection to humans who ventured too close. This explained why Laura and others had fallen ill after being bitten. It also raised terrifying questions about how widespread the contamination might already be. Armed with this knowledge, Daniel shared his findings with Dr. Carter. She listened intently, nodding as he outlined the connections between the meteorite, the mosquitoes, and Laura's condition. "It confirms what we suspected," she said thoughtfully. "This organism has been adapting to Earth's ecosystems for years, learning how to survive and thrive here. We're just starting to see the fallout." "What happens if it spreads beyond containment?" Daniel asked, his voice heavy with worry. "Could it infect millions of people?" Dr. Carter sighed, rubbing her temples. "That's our worst-case scenario. If this organism reaches a global scale, it could rewrite the genetic code of entire populations. Humanity as we know it would change forever." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Both knew the stakes were higher than ever, Saving Laura was only the beginning. They needed to find a way to stop the organism from spreading before it was too late. As night fell, Daniel stayed by Laura's bedside, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. Though unconscious, she occasionally stirred, her lips moving as if forming silent responses. At one point, her eyelids fluttered open slightly, revealing a faint hint of the same blue glow that had startled everyone during the procedure. But this time, it vanished almost instantly, leaving no trace behind. Daniel leaned closer, searching her face for answers. Who, or what, had Laura become? Would she wake up fully human, or would the alien presence inside her alter her permanently? Only time would tell. For now, all he could do was stay by her side and pray for the best. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Daniel vowed to face them with her, no matter what. Laura woke up slowly, blinking against the bright lights above her. At first, everything felt hazy. Her thoughts were jumbled, and her body seemed strangely heavy, yet lighter than before. Her eyes adjusted to the light, and she saw Daniel sitting beside her, his face etched with worry but also relief. He smiled weakly when he noticed her stirring. "Hey," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "How are you feeling?" Laura opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she frowned, trying to make sense of the flood of sensations coursing through her mind. It wasn't pain exactly. It was more like whispers, faint voices speaking in a language she didn't understand. They weren't loud enough to distract her completely, but they were persistent, lingering just beneath the surface of her consciousness. I don't know," Laura finally managed to say, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I feel different." Daniel nodded, not pressing her further. He had expected this. The doctors had warned him that the alien organism might leave lasting effects, even after the treatment appeared successful. Still, hearing it from Laura herself made it real in a way nothing else could. Dr. Carter entered the room shortly afterward, carrying a clipboard and wearing a cautious expression. She greeted Laura warmly but kept her tone professional. "How are you doing, Laura? Any discomfort or unusual feelings?" Laura hesitated before answering. She wanted to tell them about the whispers, the strange energy pulsing through her veins, but she worried they wouldn't believe her, or worse, that they'd think she was losing her mind. Instead, she settled for describing the physical symptoms. "My head feels foggy, and there's this tingling sensation all over my body like static electricity." Dr. Carter scribbled notes on her clipboard, nodding as if these answers confirmed her suspicions. "That's consistent with what we've observed. Your brain activity shows heightened awareness, almost as if your neural pathways have been rewired slightly. We're still studying the long-term implications, but for now, you seem stable." Stable. The word echoed in Laura's mind, offering little comfort. Stable didn't mean normal. Stable didn't mean safe. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging smile, but she couldn't shake the unease growing inside her. As the days passed, Laura began noticing more changes. Simple tasks like walking down the hallway or eating a meal left her feeling drained, as though her body was adjusting to new rules it didn't fully understand. But it wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was mental too. The whispers grew, louder, clearer, forming images in her mind that defied explanation. Vast networks of interconnected life forms stretched across galaxies, communicating without words, sharing knowledge instantaneously. She saw flashes of planets bathed in unfamiliar colors, creatures with shapes that shifted and flowed like liquid. It was beautiful, but also terrifying. One night, unable to sleep, Laura sat by the window in her hospital room, staring out at the stars. Daniel joined her after a while, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Neither spoke for a long time, the silence broken only by the distant hum of machines. "What do you see when you look at the stars?" Daniel asked quietly, breaking the quiet. Laura turned to him, her eyes reflecting the faint glow of the city lights outside. "I don't just see stars anymore," she admitted. "I see connections, like they're part of something bigger, something alive." "Does that sound crazy?" Daniel shook his head. No, not after everything we've been through. His reassurance meant the world to her, but it didn't erase the fear gnawing at her heart. What if she wasn't entirely human anymore? What if the alien presence inside her continued to grow, changing her in ways she couldn't control? Meanwhile, Dr. Carter worked tirelessly to uncover more about the organism. She collaborated with experts in fields ranging from genetics to astrophysics, piecing together fragments of information about its origins and behavior. One breakthrough came when they discovered traces of similar genetic material in ancient fossils found near meteor impact sites. This suggested that Earth had encountered such organisms before, perhaps millions of years ago, and that humanity might not be the first species to host them. This isn't just an invasion, Dr. Carter explained during one of their meetings. It's integration. This organism doesn't destroy, it adapts and merges with its host. That's why it's so hard to fight. It becomes part of us. The revelation sent chills down Daniel's spine. If the organism wasn't inherently hostile, then what did it want? Why had it chosen Laura and others like her as its vessel? To answer these questions, Dr. Carter proposed a bold experiment, using advanced imaging technology to map Laura's brain activity and decode the signals coming from the dormant remnants of the organism. With Laura's permission, they attached electrodes to her scalp and monitored her responses as she described the visions and sensations she experienced. What they discovered was astonishing. The organism wasn't merely passive, it was actively communicating, transmitting information in patterns that mimicked neural networks. Though fragmented and incomplete, the data hinted at a message, one that spoke of unity, evolution, and survival. It's like it's trying to teach us something, Dr. Carter said, showing Daniel and Laura the results. Not just about itself, but about life itself, about how everything is connected. Laura listened intently, her eyes wide with wonder and apprehension. For the first time since waking up, she felt a flicker of purpose. Maybe she hadn't been chosen randomly. Maybe she was meant to carry this message, to bridge the gap between humanity and whatever lay beyond. But accepting this role wasn't easy. As word of Laura's condition spread, rumors began circulating online. Some people hailed her as a miracle, a sign of humanity's next step in evolution. Others viewed her with suspicion, fearing she might pose a threat. Protesters gathered outside the hospital, holding signs demanding answers or warning of danger. Through it all, Daniel stood by Laura's side, shielding her from the chaos as best he could. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he believed in her strength. Together they vowed to face whatever challenges came their way. By the time Laura was discharged from the hospital, she had accepted her new reality, at least partially. She still struggled with the whispers and the visions, but she also embraced the unique perspective they offered. The stars no longer felt distant. They felt alive, calling to her in ways she couldn't ignore. And deep within her, the alien presence remained a silent companion waiting patiently for its next move. Laura's life after leaving the hospital was far from normal. She tried to return to her daily routine, walking Max, cooking meals, spending time with Daniel. But everything felt different now. The whispers in her mind never fully went away, lingering like a quiet hum in the background. Sometimes they were comforting, almost like a lullaby. Other times they were overwhelming, filling her thoughts with images of distant worlds and unfamiliar beings. It was as if she carried a piece of the universe inside her, and it refused to let her forget. Daniel did his best to support her, but he couldn't fully understand what she was going through. How could he? He didn't hear the voices or see the visions that haunted her dreams. Still, he stayed by her side, helping her navigate this strange new reality. They talked often, sharing their fears and hopes for the future. Laura appreciated his patience even when she struggled to explain things in words he could grasp. Dr. Carter remained a constant presence in their lives, checking in regularly to monitor Laura's condition. Over time, she grew more fascinated by the changes happening within Laura. Tests showed that the remnants of the alien organism weren't just dormant. They were evolving, integrating deeper into her neural pathways. But instead of causing harm, they seemed to enhance certain aspects of her cognition. Laura reported heightened senses, vivid dreams, and an uncanny ability to solve problems quickly. It was as though the organism had unlocked hidden potential within her. Despite these developments, Laura wrestled with feelings of isolation. She knew she wasn't entirely human anymore, and that knowledge created a barrier between her and the rest of the world. Friends and neighbors avoided her, unsure of how to act around someone who had survived such a bizarre ordeal. Even simple conversations felt strained, as if people were afraid she might say something strange or unsettling. To cope, Laura turned inward, focusing on understanding the messages the organism seemed to be sending her. At first they came in fragments, flashes of light, bursts of emotion, snippets of information too abstract to comprehend. Gradually, however, patterns began to emerge. She realized the organism wasn't trying to control her. It was teaching her. It wanted her to learn about its origins, its purpose, and perhaps even its warnings. One evening, while sitting outside under the stars, Laura experienced one of her clearest visions yet. She saw herself standing on a planet unlike anything she'd ever imagined. A world bathed in shimmering hues of purple and green, where towering crystalline structures pulsed with energy. Beings moved among them, their forms fluid and ever-changing. They communicated without speaking, their thoughts flowing directly into her mind. Through them, she understood. The organism was part of a vast network of life-spanning galaxies, working together to preserve balance and harmony across the cosmos. When the vision faded, Laura sat there for a long time, staring up at the sky. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. Instead, she felt connected, not just to the stars above, but to everything around her. The wind rustling through the trees, the chirping of crickets, the warmth of Daniel's hand as he joined her on the porch. All of it felt intertwined, part of a greater whole. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked softly, noticing the tears streaming down her face. "I'm fine," Laura replied, smiling despite herself. "Better than fine, actually. I think I finally understand." She explained her vision to him as best she could, describing the alien world and its inhabitants. Though skeptical at first, Daniel listened intently, recognizing the sincerity in her voice. By the end, he looked at her with a mix of awe and admiration. "You've always been special, Laura," he said, pulling her close. "But now, you're extraordinary." Over the following weeks, Laura embraced her role as a bridge between humanity and the unknown. With Dr. Carter's help, she collaborated on research projects aimed at decoding the organism's messages further. Together, they developed safeguards to prevent similar outbreaks in the future, ensuring that others wouldn't suffer the way she had. Scientists around the world took notice, eager to learn from her experiences and apply the insights to broader fields of study. Still, Laura knew her journey wasn't over. The organism within her continued to evolve, hinting at possibilities she couldn't yet fathom. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of futures that hadn't happened yet, moments where humanity reached out to the stars, forging alliances with civilizations beyond comprehension. These visions filled her with hope, but also with responsibility. She understood now that she wasn't just a survivor. She was a messenger, chosen to guide her species toward a brighter destiny. As months passed, Laura found solace in the little things: the laughter of children playing in the park, the smell of fresh rain on summer evenings, the steady companionship of Daniel and Max. Life went on, even amidst the extraordinary, and though she sometimes wondered if the organism would ever leave her completely, she no longer feared it. Instead, she welcomed it as part of who she had become. One clear night, Laura stood outside once again, gazing up at the stars. This time, she didn't feel alone. She felt connected to the universe, to the beings watching silently from afar, and to the countless lives depending on her to lead the way forward. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. Humanity had stared into the abyss of its own ignorance and survived. But Laura also knew that survival was only the beginning. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes and let the whispers wash over her, carrying her closer to the infinite possibilities waiting among the stars.